After the final signature dried on the divorce papers, my mother-in-law booked a $10,000 celebration dinner, dragging the whole family to welcome her son's new fiancé. It was only when the bill came that she called me in a panic, her voice shrill. "Why did you lock my card?" It was late autumn in Chicago, the sky a soft gray over the lake. Wind coming off Lake Michigan carried the damp scent of cold water and decaying leaves. Down on the street, the clatter of the elevated train was a familiar city soundtrack. I sat by the window, watching condensation gather on the glass, and thought back on a life I once believed in. A life where I was told hard work would always pay off. My name is Catherine Fan. I was 33 that year. With a degree in economics and over a decade in finance, I had worked my way up to CFO for a major construction supply company. My job was to live in the numbers, to ensure the cash flow that kept the business alive. People say finance is a cold profession, but I knew that behind every number was a payroll, a mortgage payment, a family's dinner. I met Kevin Miller at a networking event. He was 2 years older, a charming speaker, and, most importantly, a great listener. He spoke of his dream to start his own distribution company, one built on integrity and reputation. I listened, and I believed him. Perhaps it was because I was at an age where I was beginning to fear loneliness, the silence of eating alone, the deep melancholy of rainy nights. Kevin introduced me to his family on a weekend evening. His parents lived in a quiet suburb, in an older 2-story house that was well kept. The dinner was classic American comfort. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, and a bright green bean casserole. His mother, Sharon Miller, served the food while skillfully interrogating me. "So, you're in finance? Will you be able to help Kevin much with his business?" I took it as a compliment at the time. I said, "Of course. I'd do whatever I could, as long as we were a team." His father, Richard, was a man of few words. He just poured me a cup of hot coffee, his eyes gentle, seeming only to wish for a peaceful home. Kevin and I married 6 months later. When he said he was ready to start his own company, I was the first to support him. He named it Miller and Fan Supplies, a name that sounded solid and professional. People praised our partnership. I, too, felt a flicker of that romantic notion, the joy of a woman who wants to believe in a shared dream. But a company doesn't run on romance. It runs on capital and discipline. Kevin brought his market savvy and client connections. I brought my life savings, a significant sum my parents had gifted me before the wedding, and my expertise in risk management. I contributed 60% of the company's initial capital. Kevin contributed his labor and network. On paper, we were partners. In reality, I built the entire financial framework, the budget approvals, the cash flow projections, the contract templates, the credit limits, even the negotiations with the banks. I understood that when money is involved, you have to protect yourself with clear documentation, because money has no respect for personal feelings. Kevin was the face of the company. He wore crisp white shirts, had a firm handshake, and a smile that was just right. Everything he said sounded reassuring. I would watch him head off to meet clients while I stayed behind in our small, rented office, a space that was cramped but filled with hope. Those early days were exhausting but joyful. I stayed up late preparing financial reports. He came home late from closing deals. We'd meet in the kitchen, just long enough to share a bowl of instant ramen before diving back into work. I once joked that if he ever got rich, he shouldn't forget the ramen that fueled our start. He laughed and said he could never forget. "You're the one who holds the key to the safe," he'd said. I didn't know then that this joke would later be twisted into a justification for their demands, as if I were a literal vault to be emptied. From that moment, I wasn't just a wife. I was the foundation upon which others would build their lives. My in-laws had not yet shown their true colors. Sharon loved to boast to the neighbors that her son had married a brilliant woman. Kevin's 2 sisters, Jessica and Lisa, would occasionally visit, their words dripping with superficial sweetness. "Wow! Our sister-in-law looks so sophisticated." Kevin's younger brother Mark, who worked in construction, was different. He would quietly help me with my bags and whisper, "Don't let mom's words get to you." I would just smile, thinking that every family has its frictions. I believed I was strong enough to handle it. The night we hung the Miller and Fan Supplies sign, I stood under the warm yellow light, looking at my name next to my husband's. My heart swelled. I whispered to myself to trust this. Just this once. I told myself that since I had made this choice, I had to carry the weight of it with him. People say that with a husband and wife in harmony, you can achieve anything. I never imagined that sometimes, harmony is just one person enduring in silence while the other grows accustomed to receiving. After the company secured its first few contracts, I began visiting my in-laws more often. It wasn't about fulfilling traditional duties, but because Kevin would say, "Mom misses you. Stop by for dinner, it will make her happy." It sounded warm, and I wanted to keep the peace. A good daughter-in-law makes for a happy home, or so they say. My in-laws' family dynamic was clear. Sharon sat at the head of the table. Richard sat beside her, silent as a shadow. Kevin sat near his mother, and I was usually opposite them, close to the food, serving everyone and making sure nothing was needed. The two sisters, Jessica and Lisa, always arrived empty-handed but full of commentary. "Oh, our sister-in-law looks so chic, a real city girl." After saying this, Lisa would eye my handbag the way one inspects produce at the market. Before I could feel annoyed, Sharon would make a comment that sounded like a joke. "Her success is for this family to enjoy. What good is success if she keeps it to herself?" I laughed it off, chiding myself for being too sensitive. But that seemingly light-hearted remark later became the chains that bound me. Sharon had a way of prying under the guise of caring. She loved to ask about my salary, my bonuses, the company's profits and losses. When I answered vaguely, she would sigh. "I'm only asking so I can plan. The women of the house must be prudent, or money will go in the front door and out the back." She would then look directly at me, as if I were the back door. Richard was different. He would quietly pass me a piece of meat or refill my glass, sometimes looking flustered, as if afraid of his wife's disapproval. Once, when Sharon was bragging about a neighbor whose daughter-in-law had changed their family's fortunes, Richard muttered that a daughter-in-law is a daughter, and she shouldn't talk like that. One sharp glare from his wife, and he fell silent. Seeing that exchange, my heart sank. I once thought his gentle nature was a blessing, but I later learned that gentleness without a voice can become an excuse for wrongdoing to flourish. My sisters-in-law were not poor, but they were perpetually in want of things to show off. Jessica would complain that her husband's construction job paid irregularly. Lisa would mention how her daughter was about to start first grade and how expensive everything was. After their complaints, they would look at me. It wasn't a direct request, but it put me in a position where I was expected to understand. In my naivety, I would buy them small gifts, a nice bottle of wine, some organic fruit, a new shirt for my niece, thinking of it as a gesture of goodwill. Sharon was pleased by this, praising me for being considerate, but her praise felt like a stamp of ownership. See, this is how a daughter-in-law in our family should be. Only Mark, Kevin's younger brother, was different. He'd come home with construction dust on his collar, wash his hands, and ask me, "Are you tired?" It was a small question, but it made me feel like a person, not a walking ATM. Once, when Sharon criticized my dishwashing, saying I wasn't as thorough as a country girl, Mark calmly stated that if she was going to complain, he would wash the dishes tomorrow. Sharon shot him a look and told him not to spoil me. Mark went silent, but as he passed me, he whispered, "In that house, a kind word had to be whispered, while insults were proclaimed loudly." I started to notice a pattern with Kevin. In public, he was decisive. At home, he avoided conflict. Whatever his mother said, he agreed. Whatever his sisters said, he smiled. When I was silent, he would squeeze my hand under the table, a signal not to make a scene. His favorite line was, "Just be patient with Mom. She's getting older." I was patient, but my patience was mistaken for a lack of boundaries. One evening, Sharon hosted a large dinner for relatives. I was late because of an urgent matter at the office. As I walked in, she announced jokingly in front of everyone, "Well, look who it is. The CFO has arrived. Right on banker's hours." The table laughed. I laughed along, but my heart was cold. Were they laughing with me? Or at me because they knew I couldn't retort? After dinner, Lisa pulled me into the kitchen corner, her voice conspiratorial. "Hey sis, when the company really takes off, tell Kevin to help us out a bit. His family is your family, right?" I stood frozen. Her words sounded sisterly, but underneath was an assumption they had already made. My and Kevin's assets were the family's assets. I swallowed hard and said I would discuss it with Kevin. Lisa smiled, a confident smile, as if she had already won. That night, Kevin asked me if his mother and sister had said something to upset me. I told him directly, "I feel like I'm constantly being watched. Questioned about my salary, our finances. I'm not used to it." Kevin sighed. "That's just how my family is. Please try to understand." I asked, "To what extent must I understand?" He was silent. His silence reminded me of the saying about being wise for years but foolish in a moment. Sometimes, foolishness isn't about ignorance. It's about thinking that silence will solve everything. I still tried to reassure myself, telling myself to be a more accommodating daughter-in-law. But the more I bent, the more thorns they grew. I began to understand a simple truth. There's nothing wrong with family rules. The wrongness comes when people use those rules to force others to bow down without ever being allowed to stand up straight. After a few months of grinding, Kevin and I could finally breathe a little. We weren't wealthy, but revenue was steady, and we weren't constantly chasing payments. I had barely started to feel relieved when Kevin said, "Honey, we need a bit more flexibility with our funds. Our suppliers are demanding faster payments, and we'll lose out if we're too slow." I understood. Cash flow in this industry was precarious. One clog could jam the entire machine. After careful consideration, I decided to open a high-limit business credit card in my name. I went through the proper channels with the bank, signed all the paperwork, and established clear rules. Every expense required a receipt. Anyone using it had to report it, and we would reconcile at the end of each month. Kevin nodded enthusiastically, assuring me he was a professional, not some reckless spender. Initially, I only gave Kevin a supplementary card for client-related expenses. I kept the main card, as I was used to financial oversight. For the first few weeks, he was responsible. The receipts for client dinners and gas for business trips all seemed reasonable. I even congratulated myself on our efficient system. I managed the finances while he handled the business. Then one evening, Kevin said something that made my stomach drop. "Mom says she's getting older, and it's embarrassing for her to ask for money every time she needs something. Could you give her a supplementary card? Just so she doesn't feel left out." I looked at him. Left out was a phrase designed to be hard to refuse. I tried to stick to my principles. A card is fine, but with a low limit. And whatever she spends, she needs to let me know. Kevin smiled. "Of course. How much could she possibly spend?" A week later, Sharon called me, her voice unusually sweet. "Kate, dear, are you busy? I'm at the jewelry store trading in an old necklace, but I'm a little short. Could you transfer some money for me?" I heard the words "a little short" and didn't ask for details, just told her to use the card. She laughed. Our daughter-in-law is so understanding. Before long, Jessica and Lisa started borrowing as well. They wouldn't ask for a card directly. Instead, it was roundabout. "Hey Kate, I'm at the salon and I'm short on cash." Or, "My son is sick. I need to pay the hospital bill up front. My husband will pay you back tomorrow." Each time, Kevin would give me a pleading look. I felt trapped between my principles and so-called family harmony. I agreed, not because I was a fool, but because I feared being labeled stingy. In life, sometimes the fear of a bad reputation is stronger than the fear of losing money. And my in-laws lived more for appearances than for reality. And so, a third and fourth supplementary card were issued. 4 names now under my financial management: Kevin, Sharon, Jessica, and Lisa. I told myself that if everyone just spent a little, I could control it. I set up monthly reconciliation reminders and told Kevin to remind his mother and sisters to keep their receipts. He agreed automatically, but life doesn't follow an Excel spreadsheet. Sharon's expenses were no longer a little short. She bought a silk dress for a wedding, new shoes to match her age, and a handbag because she didn't want people to look down on her. Once she even said to Kevin, right in front of me, I went to my bridge club and all the women were showing off gifts from their daughters-in-law. It would be humiliating for me to show up empty-handed. Kevin turned to me with an appeasing smile. It doesn't cost much to make mom happy. Jessica started getting regular spa treatments. She would send me pictures of her manicures with a text. Just trying to stay fresh, sister. Can't look old. Or my husband might start looking elsewhere. Lisa became addicted to online shopping. Every few days, a delivery would arrive. One day, I saw a pile of boxes in their living room and asked, "What's all this?" Sharon answered nonchalantly, "Oh, just some things for the girls. It's nothing." "You're a CFO. What's there to worry about?" The phrase "it's nothing" felt like salt in a wound. Whose money wasn't worth anything? I started scrutinizing the statements, not to find fault, but to protect our families and the company's cash flow. I found a swarm of small but frequent charges: upscale cafes, cosmetic stores, luxury supermarkets, and even a seafood buffet on the very day Lisa posted a photo of herself treating herself. I asked Kevin if he had reminded them about the receipts. He brushed it off. "Oh, come on, they're family. You're being too rigid. It's killing the mood." Killing the mood. Or killing our financial discipline. At work, I was still responsible for employee salaries, supplier payments, and collecting debts. I never paid a salary a day late because I knew people's livelihoods were not a game. Yet at my in-laws' house, they spent my money like water and treated it as normal. The scary part wasn't a single large expense. It was the habit they formed. Swipe whenever you want. Buy whatever you like. With the unspoken assumption that I would pay. I tried to address it tactfully. At dinner one evening, I said gently, "Mom, Jessica, Lisa, when you use the cards, let's reconcile at the end of the month so I can manage the finances better." Sharon slammed her chopsticks down, a smile on her face but not in her eyes. "Well, aren't you the professional manager? I spend a little, and I have to file a report?" Jessica added, "Our sister-in-law is a finance person, so she's very calculating." Lisa delivered the final blow. "It's probably because you don't have kids yet that you have so much time to worry about these small things." I froze. They used my childlessness to silence me, a blow that was both painful and impossible to counter at the dinner table. Kevin just put more food on my plate, as if to say, "Just eat and let it go." That night, I lay in bed, facing the wall, listening to the rain on the roof. An old saying came to mind: "Trust once broken is lost forever." A cold layer began to form around my heart. I still loved my husband and wanted to keep my family together, but I also knew that if this habit didn't stop, it would eventually swallow both our company and our marriage. It's easy to talk about having children, but living through the pressure is another matter. In 3 years of marriage, I never avoided the subject. I yearned for a child. Seeing parents with their kids in the park would sometimes bring a lump to my throat. But I was busy with the company, and Kevin was always out late. Our lives were a tangled mess. We just assumed it would happen eventually. Then the questions started. First as a drizzle, then a downpour. It began with Sharon asking gently, "Are you taking your vitamins?" Then it became, "Any good news yet?" Soon after, Jessica chimed in, "You're still young, but maybe the stress from work is getting to you." Lisa would just smile. "If you're too busy chasing money, maybe heaven won't grant you your wish." By then, I was already feeling uncomfortable but tried to endure it. I told myself that they were just anxious for a grandchild, which was normal. But that normality started to feel more and more like a judgment. I finally told Kevin, "Let's go see a doctor. I don't want to guess anymore." He agreed. "Yeah, let's go. Mom's constant nagging is getting tiring." We went to a major clinic and did a full round of tests. I waited for the results, my hands cold. Kevin sat beside me, his eyes glued to his phone. I didn't blame him. I knew he was busy. It was just that in the moment a woman needs her partner most, a phone screen can make you feel utterly alone. The doctor was direct. "There are no serious reproductive issues with either of you. My cycle was affected by stress, and Kevin's lifestyle was irregular, with too many late nights. The doctor advised us to adjust our habits, reduce stress, and monitor for a few more months." I breathed a sigh of relief. At least neither of us was at fault. I planned to go home and tell the family gently that the doctor said we just needed to rest and not be stressed. I thought this would reassure them. I trust in Ella, but I forgot that some people don't want the truth. They just want someone to blame. That evening, Sharon made a fragrant noodle soup. As she served it, she asked, "So, what did the doctor say? Is there a problem?" I answered honestly. "The doctor said we're both just stressed and need to adjust our lifestyles. No one has any serious illness." I said it to put their minds at ease, but it only gave them a new angle of attack. Sharon put the ladle down and looked me up and down, her tone slow and condescending. "If you're not sick, then why can't you conceive? Or is it that you don't know how to take care of yourself? Drinking cold things? Staying up late? Working like a man until you've ruined your body?" I was stunned. I couldn't believe a mother would say that to her daughter-in-law at the dinner table. Before I could respond, Lisa smirked. "Mom's right. A woman should know how to care for her body. If you just chase money all the time, you'll find that when you need something, heaven won't provide." Jessica added, "Look, Kate, I'm being honest. If you can't have children, you need to be more accommodating. This family can't be without heirs." That phrase, "be more accommodating," felt like a punch to the gut. I looked at Kevin, waiting for him to say just one thing. "Mom, sisters, don't talk like that." But he just put a piece of fish on my plate and whispered, "Eat up." I didn't need the fish. I needed him to be a wall to protect me. Richard's face turned red. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then fell silent. Finally, he just sighed, stood up, and walked outside. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was as heavy as a swallowed tear. I watched his retreating back, and felt a pang of pity for a good man who was powerless. Mark arrived just in time to hear Sharon's next line, a line I would never forget. "A woman who is barren must know how to make up for it with money. We didn't bring her into this family to be a decoration." Mark stopped in his tracks and looked at his mother. "Mom, that's not fair to Kate. Having children is a matter of fate." Sharon glared at him. "What do you know about adult matters?" Mark didn't argue further. He glanced at me for a second, his eyes an apology for the entire house. Then he quietly went to the back to wash his hands, skipping dinner. Mark's silence in that moment was warmer than Kevin's. At least one person was silent out of disagreement. Kevin was silent out of fear. That night, I sat in front of the mirror for a long time. I was still me, just with darker circles under my eyes and heavier shoulders. I asked myself what I had done wrong. I worked hard, helped build a company, took care of the home, and fulfilled all my duties. Yet, simply because I hadn't had a child, I was being turned into a barren tree. A person who had to compensate with money. People say words are free, so choose them kindly. But in my in-laws' home, words were chosen to inflict pain. From that day on, whenever I heard Sharon call my name, my heart would jump, the conditioned reflex of someone expecting to be poked in an open wound. I still tried to keep the peace, to play the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. But something inside me had changed. I no longer saw their words as thoughtless slips of the tongue. I began to understand they were placing me in a position lower than human. And when a woman is pushed down that far, she either breaks or she learns to stand up straight, even if she has to stand alone. After that dinner, my in-laws didn't stop their cruelty. They just became more subtle. They no longer said Baron to my face in front of others. Instead, they used small, sharp jabs disguised as jokes. As you know, a small needle, pricked repeatedly, will eventually draw blood. Sharon began to treat my financial contributions as a given. One day, she called me at the office, her tone as casual as if she were ordering groceries. "Kate, we're having a memorial for Kevin's great-grandfather this weekend. I've invited about 20 relatives. I need you to take care of the food. Make it impressive. We have a reputation to uphold." I sat in my office, a spreadsheet of unpaid invoices in front of me, her words making my head spin. I asked quietly, "Are you planning to cook or cater?" She replied, "Catering is too expensive. A capable daughter-in-law should know how to manage. If a woman can't even handle a family dinner, what good is she?" That last part, what good is she? I did it. I went to the wholesale market, ordered a few catered dishes to save time, and hired help for the kitchen. I didn't mind the work. I minded the feeling of being treated like a servant. I looked at the constant reminders on my phone, then at my hands, smelling of onion and garlic, and wanted to laugh. People used to call me a CFO. Here, my value was measured by my ability to put on a good show for the family. On the day of the memorial, the house was full. Sharon wore a traditional purple dress and a sparkling pearl necklace. As she poured tea, she boasted, "My daughter-in-law took care of everything. She's very capable." The women looked me over and nodded. Yes, a daughter-in-law like this is a blessing. I heard the word blessing, and it tasted as salty as tears. A blessing for whom? For those enjoying it, or for the one who had to provide it? Jessica and Lisa were there, full of praise but offering no help. As I was clearing the table, Lisa whispered in my ear, "You did a great job today. Mom is happy. And when she's happy, she'll be good to you. It will make your life here easier." I froze. So, to have an easy life in this house, I had to buy it with money and labor, not earn it with love and respect. I glanced at Kevin. He was his usual charming self, mingling with relatives, pouring drinks, the perfect host. Someone complimented him on marrying such a capable wife. Kevin smiled and said, "Yes, I'm lucky to have her." I heard the word lucky, but my heart felt empty. It was the kind of luck where everyone takes and no one gives back. In the following days, the company entered a critical phase. I had to secure a short-term loan from the bank for a new shipment and deal with several overdue accounts. The employees looked to me as their pillar of stability. I stuck to my principles. Salaries were always on time. Supplier accounts were clear. And every document was in order. I knew that cutting corners in business would eventually lead to ruin. But just as I dragged my exhausted body home, Sharon would call, "Kate, Jessica's cousin is getting married next week. Figure out how much we should give as a gift. It has to be a respectable amount. We can't look cheap." I asked, "Shouldn't Jessica decide that herself?" Sharon huffed. "Whose family?" "This family. As a daughter-in-law, you are responsible for maintaining this family's image. So, I had to maintain their image with my money." I started to feel a deep, soul-crushing fatigue that sleep couldn't fix. I was tired of constantly holding everything up. The company, my in-laws' happiness, and my own composure against the constant jabs about my childlessness. One day at dinner, I felt a wave of nausea. I thought it might be good news. I rushed to buy a pregnancy test, only to see the single line appear, my hopes plummeting. I sat in the bathroom and laughed. A bitter laugh that made my eyes sting. Life has its ups and downs, but my downs seemed to stretch on endlessly. That evening, Mark came home and saw me sitting silently at the table. He didn't ask much, just got me a bottle of water and said quietly, "Have you eaten?" I bought some food. I shook my head. Mark hesitated. Don't push yourself so hard. They say that a fish rots from the head down. But I think a house rots when there's no love in it. After that, he fell silent. I looked at my young brother-in-law and felt a mix of warmth and pain. Warmth, because someone in this house still saw me as a person. Pain, because his kindness was too small to shield me from the weight crushing me every day. Kevin came home late. As he took off his shoes, he asked, "What's wrong? You look pale." I told him the truth. "I'm tired. I feel like nothing I do is ever enough. Your family always needs something from me. I'm not a machine." Kevin sighed, his voice placating. "Just hang in there a little longer. That's just how they are. If we keep the peace at home, things will be better outside." I heard his words and my heart sank. Peace at home meant I had to be silent, to endure, to bear it all. And better outside meant he could maintain his perfect image to the world. I turned away, looking at my faint reflection in the window. For the first time, I dared to ask myself a question I had never allowed myself to ask before. If this continues, when will I ever get to be a wife instead of a hired hand? After that conversation with Kevin, I didn't cause a scene. I no longer had the energy to argue. I just began to observe, the same way I observe cash flow in a business. When you see a discrepancy, you know there's a problem. But to draw a conclusion, you need evidence. Kevin started coming home later. It wasn't the lateness of a busy man, but the lateness of someone avoiding me. One night, he came home with the scent of a strange perfume on his shirt, not the shampoo I bought at the supermarket. He claimed he'd been in a meeting with an important client in a fancy air-conditioned office where they sprayed air freshener. I nodded without further questions. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who inspects her husband's clothes for evidence. But then, one afternoon, I needed to borrow Kevin's phone to call my accountant, Susan, because mine was dead. He was in the shower and had left his phone on the table. I just intended to make a quick call. But as the screen lit up, a new message popped up. It was just a few words, but they were enough to make my hands go cold. "Are you home yet? I'm waiting." The sender's name was Amber. I stood there, frozen, as if someone had hit my mute button. People say women are prone to suspicion, but I work in finance. I don't trust feelings. I trust data. So, I didn't read any further. I didn't snoop. I placed the phone back exactly where it was and went to charge my own. My heart was pounding, but my face remained calm. That evening, I watched Kevin. He kept glancing at his phone during dinner. I asked if he was busy. He replied that it was just a client messaging about work. His answer was so smooth it sounded rehearsed. I looked at the soup in front of me. It tasted like plain water. Kevin fell asleep quickly that night. I couldn't. I lay there, listening to the fan, the distant sound of traffic, my mind racing. If she was an employee, why were her words so intimate? I wasn't going to be a fool. Baja, the next morning, I went to work as usual. I didn't confront him. I chose to investigate the one thing I had the right and the skill to investigate: the expenses. By now, the company had a clear spending protocol. Client entertainment had a budget, gifts required approval, and business travel had logs. I opened the system to review Kevin's recent expense reports. A few entries made me pause. 2 dinners at a high-end restaurant in 1 week, on the same days he claimed to be meeting major clients. I checked the times on the receipts, the locations, and then his work calendar. His calendar entries were vague. Meeting with partner. No company name, no contact person, no meeting minutes. I called Susan, the head accountant, into my office. I had hired her from day one. She was meticulous, discreet, and principled. I didn't ask about an affair. I asked about a professional matter. "Susan, are there complete supporting documents for these entertainment expenses?" She looked at me for a moment, as if weighing her words, then placed a file on my desk and spoke softly. "Kate, Kevin's expense approvals have been strange lately. He said we needed to be more flexible and skip some of the checks. When I asked for more details on a few items, he got annoyed. I looked up. Annoyed how? Susan hesitated. He said that since I work in finance, I'm too rigid and that I slow him down. I let out a silent, bitter laugh. For 3 years, my rigidity had kept the company from collapsing. But for someone who wanted unchecked access to funds, my principles were a thorn in his side. I told Susan to keep digital copies of all documents and to make a note of any that were missing information. I spoke calmly. But in my head, I was already assessing the risk. There was a pattern, a motive, and a trend. That afternoon, I went to my in-laws' house because Sharon had called for dinner. I walked in to hear her complaining. Kevin is working so hard these days, he's getting so thin. As his wife, you need to take care of him. Don't let outsiders show him more affection than you do. She emphasized the word outsiders, as if there was already an invisible presence in our lives. Lisa smirked. Successful men attract a lot of attention. A wife has to be vigilant, or she'll lose him, Jessica added. And you have to consider, maybe it's fate. This family needs a grandchild. If there isn't one, a man will feel lonely. Each sentence was like the scraping of a knife. They didn't know I had just seen the name Amber. But they were already laying the groundwork to blame me if I lost my husband. The fault would be mine for not being vigilant, for not having a child. Kevin sat there, silent. He was silent as always. The only difference was that this time, I no longer saw his silence as gentle. I saw it as complicity. When I got home, I took a long shower. The water ran over my shoulders but couldn't wash away the coldness in my chest. An old proverb came to mind. An innocent person has nothing to fear. If I was innocent, I had nothing to be afraid of. But I also couldn't close my eyes and let someone else chop down my tree. From that day on, I noticed the small things. Kevin changed his computer password. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. He would go out onto the balcony to take quiet calls. He would smile to himself while looking at his screen, then turn to me with a normal expression as if nothing had happened. These small details were like the miscellaneous charges on a credit card statement. Individually, they were insignificant, but together, they added up to a very large number, the number of betrayal. I didn't have the final proof yet, but I knew what I needed to do next. Not to start a fight, but to save what was left of my life. I never asked Kevin another question about Amber. I knew that with a man like him, if I asked, he would have 100 ways to twist the narrative back to me being overly suspicious. I also didn't want to turn my home into a stage for arguments, giving my mother-in-law and sisters-in-law more gossip to chew on. I chose my own way. The way of someone who has been in finance for too long. Slow, deliberate, and free of emotion. One afternoon, I left work early and drove to a neighborhood near the office. I found a small studio apartment for rent, in a modern building with an elevator and keycard access. It wasn't large, just big enough for a bed, a desk, a small kitchenette, and a window overlooking a line of trees. I signed the lease in my name, paid the deposit, and as I held the key, I let out a sigh of relief. It was a strange feeling, like someone who was drowning finally finding solid ground. I didn't move my things out in a dramatic fashion. I just brought over a few changes of clothes, an old laptop, and some toiletries. I told Kevin that the company had a big project, and I needed a place closer to the office to work late. He just grunted in response, not asking any more questions. His indifference only confirmed my suspicions. His heart had been elsewhere for a long time. The next thing I did wasn't to cry or confide in friends. I started backing up data. I logged into every company account I had access to. I changed the passwords for critical emails, added two-factor authentication, and took notes in a small notebook. I downloaded the company's articles of incorporation, business registration, list of shareholders, and all previous meeting minutes. I filtered through cash flow reports, major contracts, and credit agreements. I took nothing that wasn't rightfully mine. I was simply creating a record of my contributions and responsibilities. Then I moved on to my personal affairs. The condo we were living in was a gift from my parents before the marriage. Then, they had said that a daughter should have a home in her own name, so if anything ever happened, she would have a place to go. I had laughed at their worries then. Now, I realized that older generations may not know the law, but they understand life. My parents had seen further than I had. I pulled out the box of documents, the deed, the purchase agreement, the gift letter, all in the name of Catherine Fan. I photographed them, scanned them, and saved them to a hard drive and a private cloud account only I could access. I also took pictures of utility bills and maintenance fee receipts in my name. I was so thorough that if anyone later tried to claim it was marital property, I would have a complete file to prove otherwise. Once that was done, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Mr. Harrison was recommended by a colleague. He was a no-nonsense man in his 40s with a direct gaze, the kind of person who understands the heart of a matter immediately. I met him at a quiet coffee shop. I didn't give him a long emotional story. I contributed more capital. I am the guarantor on our business loans. My husband is showing signs of misusing company funds. My marriage is at risk of collapse. I need to know what is considered separate property and what is marital property in a divorce. What do I need to prepare to avoid being left with nothing? Mr. Harrison listened and then asked a few specific questions. Is there documentation of your capital contribution? Can you prove the source of the funds was premarital? Whose name is on the condo deed? Do the company's articles state the ownership percentages? Who is the legal representative of the company? He didn't ask about my feelings. He asked about the facts that would determine the outcome. When I showed him the scanned documents for the condo, he nodded. This property is in your name, gifted before the marriage. In principle, it is your separate property, but be aware. In a conflict, people often resort to emotional manipulation. Do not sign anything hastily. Do not agree to any vague language. I asked what would happen if my husband was embezzling from the company. Mr. Harrison replied that this would no longer be a simple marital dispute. If there is evidence of funds being used for personal purposes, transferring money to individuals, or making purchases unrelated to the business, there could be legal consequences. But any action requires documentation. A clear paper trail. You are on the right track, he said. I heard the words on the right track, and a chill went down my spine. It wasn't fear. It was the knowledge that from this moment on, I had crossed the line between a wife trying to save her marriage and a woman preparing to save herself. Back at the studio, I received a message from Sharon in the family group chat. Come for dinner this weekend. I have something to say. It was followed by a long voice message, the content of which was the usual veiled criticism about my childlessness and a woman's duties, ending with her favorite phrase, "What will people think?" I listened and turned off the screen. In the quiet of my small room, with the hum of the air conditioner, I found it almost funny. For so long, I had tried to live my life so that people would be impressed, while no one ever bothered to ask if I was exhausted. That night, my brother called. He asked just one question. Are you okay? I was silent for a few seconds, then said, I'm learning how to be. He didn't press for more, just reminded me to keep my documents safe and not to isolate myself. If I needed anything, I should call him. I hung up the phone. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel cornered. I was still in pain, still exhausted, still sleepless. But now, I had a way out. And for a woman in my position, just knowing there is a way out can calm a frantic heart by half. I didn't plan to expose Kevin in a fit of rage. I wanted to choose a moment when he couldn't deflect with his usual line. You're overthinking things. That moment came on a weekday evening. A sudden thunderstorm broke, the thunder rumbling loudly. Kevin came home late and went straight to the shower, his phone in hand, a habit he had developed over the past few weeks. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of plain porridge, the sound of the running water making me feel as cold as ice. When he came out, His phone buzzed repeatedly. I didn't snatch it. I just looked at him and said calmly, "Have you eaten?" "I made porridge." He replied that he had already eaten out. He sat down and immediately started texting, a quick smile flashing across his lips. I placed a bowl on the table and sat opposite him. I asked, "Who is Amber?" Kevin froze for a split second, then regained his composure and forced a laugh. "You read my messages?" I shook my head. "I don't need to. I just need to see." He sighed, the sigh of a man who has been caught, not one who is remorseful. He put his phone down. "It's not what you think." I cut him off. "Don't tell me it's not what I think. Just answer the question. Who is she?" He looked at me for a moment, then replied, "An acquaintance." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "An acquaintance who texts you at night saying she's waiting? An acquaintance for whom you take your phone into the bathroom and change your computer password?" My voice remained steady. "Does she have anything to do with the company's money?" That question made his expression change. He frowned. "Why are you dragging the company into this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Because I've seen irregular expenses, restaurants, gifts, shopping that have nothing to do with the business." He jumped up, his voice rising. "You've been spying on me." I answered slowly. "I was reviewing the cash flow of the company. I am a majority shareholder in." "That's not spying. That's my responsibility." Kevin stood motionless. Outside, the rain beat against the window pane. I could hear my own heart, but my face was a mask of calm. I thought of all the times I had been humiliated over my childlessness, the family dinners I had funded, the times I had saved their face with my money, and the name Amber glowing on the screen like a small flame, slowly burning down my entire home. Finally, Kevin told the truth, but in the way of someone who confesses while still trying to maintain the upper hand. "Okay, I've been seeing Amber. But I'm exhausted, Kate. You're always about work, work, work. At home, it's all about numbers, procedures, rules." "I can't breathe." I heard his words and my chest ached. I wanted to scream, "Who asked you to breathe with my lungs?" But I swallowed it down and asked, "So, what do you want to do?" He sat back down, rubbing his face as if performing a scene of anguish. "Let's end this. Let's be civilized." The word civilized landed on the table like a block of ice. I looked at him and laughed until tears streamed down my face. "Civilized? After you used company money to buy gifts for another woman? Civilized? After you let your mother and sisters humiliate me in front of relatives? Civilized? After you stood by silently like a stranger?" I asked. "When you say civilized, you mean an uncontested divorce, right?" He nodded, his tone as casual as if he were discussing a new phone. "Yes, let's part amicably. I won't embarrass you." I laughed again. "Embarrass me? I have been thoroughly humiliated. You just never noticed." At that moment, Kevin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and quickly silenced it. I knew who was calling. I stood up, poured a glass of water, and took a sip to keep my voice from shaking. "I'll be meeting with my lawyer tomorrow. You should prepare as well." He frowned. "A lawyer? Why?" "If it's uncontested, we just sign the papers." I turned and looked at him for a long time. "Did you think I would walk away with nothing?" He was silent. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, not because he regretted hurting me, but because he was afraid I was no longer easy to control. Before I could walk into the bedroom, a notification popped up from the family group chat. It was a voice message from Sharon. Her voice sharp as a razor. "Kate, let me be blunt. This family needs a grandchild. If you can't provide one, you need to know your place. Don't hold Kevin back." I stood frozen. Not because I was surprised, but because she had finally said aloud what she had wanted all along. To push me out and make room for someone else. Kevin heard it. He didn't grab the phone, didn't text back. "Mom, don't say that." He just looked at me, his voice flustered. "Mom has a temper. Don't take it to heart." I turned back to him. I won't take it to heart. I'll take it to my lawyer. Kevin was stunned. For the first time, I had said something he didn't know how to handle. That night, I didn't sleep. I went back to my studio, opened my laptop, and organized all the files I had backed up. I read every line of the company's articles, every document related to the condo, every transaction that Susan had flagged as suspicious. I was no longer a wife waiting for her husband to come back. I was a woman preparing to save herself. The next morning, I met with Mr. Harrison. He reviewed the documents and said one simple thing: don't fight them with words. Fight them with the law. I nodded. I knew that from this point on, words were meaningless. All that mattered were documents, timelines, legal rights, and my own clarity of mind. On Monday morning, at 7:50 a.m., I stood before the county courthouse. The air was still damp from the night's rain. I wore a simple white shirt and black pants. No makeup. Not to look pitiful or strong, but to be as composed as I would be for an important meeting. For me, divorce was no longer an emotional event. It was a procedure to be executed correctly. Kevin arrived a few minutes late, looking calm, almost relieved. I found it amusing. People say men are clueless, but many are only clueless when they believe they have nothing to lose. We filed the paperwork and waited to be called for mediation. Mr. Harrison had prepared me. In an uncontested divorce, the main points are verifying voluntary consent and agreements on children and assets. With no children, that part was simple. As for assets, I reminded myself not to let emotions drag me into a verbal battle. When the mediator asked if we were divorcing voluntarily, Kevin answered immediately. Yes, voluntarily. I replied the same, my voice as steady as if I were reading a financial statement. In that moment, I no longer heard my own heartbeat, just the slow whir of the ceiling fan and the soft tapping of a pen on the table. The mediator asked about the asset agreement. Kevin looked at me, his voice low as if granting a favor. Just tell me what you need. I don't want to make things difficult for you. I looked him straight in the eye and answered concisely. Everything necessary is outlined in the settlement agreement. We will follow the documents. Kevin was taken aback. He had likely expected me to be emotional, to be sad, to cry. Allowing him to play the part of the magnanimous man, I gave him no such opportunity. My mind was clear. The point wasn't to argue here. The point was to legally dissolve the marriage first. That way, any future disputes over company assets, the misuse of funds, or my right to the condo couldn't be twisted into a simple marital squabble. I needed a clean legal separation. Kevin signed quickly, like someone signing for a package. I signed more slowly, not out of regret, but because I checked every single line. I had once lived by the belief that honesty was the best policy. But now I understood that honesty without vigilance is just an invitation to be preyed upon. I would not make a mistake on a single word. Around noon, we walked out. The courthouse hallway was long and bright. Kevin turned to me and said quietly, "Well, that's it. We both have new lives now." I nodded but didn't reply. Some things, if spoken, would only make me feel weak. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. The name was still there, a hook I hadn't yet removed. Our loving family. A message from Sharon popped up, long and full of exclamation points. She had attached a voice message. I pressed play. Her voice was giddy and loud, as if she were at a wedding. "Tonight, the whole family is celebrating at a fancy hotel. We've invited all our relatives to wash away the bad luck and officially introduce the new daughter-in-law, Amber Scott." She emphasized her words with boastful pride. "We're doing it properly, so the whole world knows that when this family gets rid of the old, good fortune follows immediately." Attached were photos of the deposit receipt, the lavishly decorated banquet table, and a picture of Sharon standing close to a young woman in a bright dress, her hand possessively on the woman's waist. Jessica sent a heart emoji. Lisa sent fireworks. Relatives chimed in with praise. "This is how it should be done." I stood in the sun, staring at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. Not because I missed Kevin, but because of the way they had turned me into bad luck that needed to be washed away. 3 years as their daughter-in-law, I had never missed a family event, never let them lose face. Now, they were celebrating my departure like they were finally free of a heavy burden. Amid the cheerful messages, one short text made my eyes sting. It was from Mark. "Mom, this is cruel." That was it. In a group chat filled with celebration, his quiet dissent was a small, sharp grain of sand. It was enough to know I hadn't been wrong about him. Before I could process it all, Kevin called, his voice urgent and annoyed. "You saw the group chat?" Mom was just excited. "Don't make a big deal out of it," I asked him softly. "What would be a big deal?" he stammered. "I mean, we're divorced now. We should both maintain some dignity." I laughed out loud. "Dignity? I have maintained your family's dignity for far too long." I hung up. I stood there, watching the traffic, and felt a strange calm settle over me. In that moment, I understood one thing very clearly. They didn't need me to be sad to feel victorious. They just needed me to be silent, so they could continue their performance. But from this day forward, I would not be silent in the same way again. I put my phone in my bag, walked down the steps, and went to my car. The sun beat down on my shoulders. I started the engine. The rearview mirror reflected my face. It was still me, but my eyes were no longer looking back for anyone. I drove straight back to the studio. I closed the door, sat down at my desk, and opened a to-do list like one opens a ledger of debts. There's a time and a place for everything. My time had finally come. Back at the studio, I changed my clothes and washed my face. The cold water did little to soothe the ache in my chest. It wasn't that I still loved Kevin. I was hurt by the way I had been discarded like a piece of trash. Hurt because the life I had dedicated to supporting his family had merely served as a platform for them to stand on, while I was left below. I was about to turn off my phone but opened it again. I looked at the group chat one more time. The photos of the banquet table, the deposit receipt, Sharon's triumphant voice. The words were like needles. Wash away the bad luck. Welcome the new daughter-in-law. Show the world our good fortune. I put the phone down, opened my laptop, and logged into my online banking portal. The screen displayed my primary credit card and the 4 supplementary cards issued under my authority. The names were there in black and white. Sharon Miller, Kevin Miller, Jessica Miller, Lisa Miller. I sat up straight. My hands weren't shaking. Strangely, I was as calm as when I was reviewing a fraudulent expense report. I thought back over the past 3 years of paying the bills each month because I considered them family. I remembered their insults at the dinner table and Kevin's words, "Let's be civilized," as if I were the one causing trouble. I told myself one simple thing: the cards are mine. The authority is mine. I am just taking back what belongs to me. I clicked on Sharon's supplementary card first. A confirmation window popped up. I stared at it for 3 seconds and then clicked LOCK. Next was Kevin's card. Lock. Jessica's card. Lock. Lisa's card. Lock. 4 confirmations. 4 swift actions. Like closing 4 doors. I didn't feel vengeful. Just a sense of cutting off a lifeline that had been draining me. I sent a final message to the bank. Flag any unusual transactions on the primary card. Done. I put the phone down and made a cup of hot tea. Steam rose from the cup, but I still felt cold inside. I glanced at the clock. It was just after 4 p.m. Around 6 p.m., my phone rang. It was Sharon. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice was shrill and breathless. "Kate, what have you done? Why isn't my card working?" I replied softly. "You were using a supplementary card on my account. I locked it, so it won't work," she screamed. "You're trying to humiliate me. All our relatives are here. The hotel is demanding payment." I took a sip of tea, my voice still even. "You booked a party to introduce your new daughter-in-law. That has nothing to do with me." There was a pause. Then she started to cry. You're cruel. You're destroying this family. I didn't argue. I said one thing. I'm just no longer paying your bills, Sharon. Then I hung up. Less than a minute later, Kevin called. He wasn't yelling like his mother, but his voice was tight with the fear of public humiliation. Kate, unlock the card. There are a lot of people here. This is embarrassing. I asked, whose embarrassment is it? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. I'll give you the money tomorrow. Just unlock it for tonight. I chuckled softly. If you can pay tomorrow, you can figure it out tonight. You're welcoming a new fiancé, not me. He started to get angry. Don't take this too far. I replied, I'm not taking it too far. I'm doing what is right. Then I hung up. Only then did my hands start to shake slightly. Not from fear, but from the liberation of finally speaking my mind without asking for permission. Around 7 p.m., Mark called. His voice was low, and I could hear commotion in the background. Kate, I'm not calling to ask you to unlock the card. I just wanted to say you did the right thing. It's chaos here. I listened silently as he described the scene. Sharon was arguing with the hotel manager. Jessica and Lisa were fuming, blaming the new fiancé under their breath. Kevin was pacing, trying to call me, and then other friends. Amber, the new fiancée, stood to the side, her heavy makeup failing to hide her panic. The relatives, who had been laughing earlier, were now sitting in awkward silence. Mark sighed. My dad had to come down. He's trying to sort it out with the hotel. He looks exhausted. Hearing about Richard made my chest tighten. I never disliked him. He was just weak, but his weakness had made him the one to clean up the messes his wife and children made. I told Mark to take care of his father, and that I would take responsibility for my actions. He replied quietly, You take care of yourself too. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant, just an empty space where a heavy burden used to be. I knew what hurt them the most wasn't the money itself, but the loss of the power to spend my money in front of everyone. The loss of the feeling that they could have whatever they wanted. I looked at my now cold tea and thought, in life, you reap what you sow. I had been paying for 3 years. Now it was their turn. That night, I stayed in. I drew the curtains, turned on a lamp, and watched my phone screen light up and go dark with missed calls and notifications. I had locked the cards and made my position clear. But people who are used to living off the forbearance of others will thrash wildly when their supply is cut off. I opened the group chat one last time. The festive photos were gone, replaced by a chaotic stream of panicked messages. It was almost comical. The truth always comes out, only this time it came out in the lobby of the city's fanciest hotel. I never intended to humiliate anyone. I just wanted them out of my life. But I knew Sharon's personality. She wouldn't accept being cut off quietly. She would invent stories, paint me as the villain, and preserve her image as the victimized mother-in-law. Knowing this, I decided to get ahead of her narrative with the truth. I went to a popular online community forum for Chicago residents. I wrote a short factual post. No swearing, no insults, just a timeline, context, and evidence. I stated that my ex-husband's family had booked a hotel banquet to wash away bad luck and introduce his new fiancée on the same day our divorce was finalized. The payment method was tied to a supplementary card in my name. I had revoked access to the card as I was no longer affiliated with them, and the hotel was now requiring them to settle the bill. I attached 2 images: a screenshot of the group chat message and a redacted copy of the deposit receipt. I was careful not to dox anyone, just to prove my story was true. After posting, I put my phone away. I didn't wait for likes or comments. I just told myself I had done my part. What happened next was up to the court of public opinion. But sometimes, life moves faster than you think. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing incessantly. Friends were texting, and a video clip had surfaced, filmed by someone in the hotel lobby. It showed Sharon arguing with the staff, Jessica and Lisa looking mortified, and Kevin pacing frantically. The climax was Sharon collapsing to the floor, clutching her chest and wailing that I was giving her a heart attack. The clip went viral. The comments were a mix of sympathy, scorn, and ridicule, but one sentiment was repeated over and over. If you want to live a fancy life, pay for it yourself. The part that saddened me was seeing Richard at the end of the clip. His back stooped, holding a piece of paper, trying to reason with the manager. He was a man forced to put out a fire he didn't start. Late that night, the calls began. First, Jessica, her voice no longer sweet, but sharp. Kate, how could you do this? My mother is humiliated. I replied, I think you have the wrong number. I'm no longer your sister-in-law. She retorted that I was the one who gave them the cards. So I was the one who hurt them. I said calmly that I was just stopping what was wrong. She accused me of posting online to shame them. I said I posted the truth with evidence. If she felt shame, she should ask why her family was so comfortable spending other people's money. She hung up. Next was Lisa, who tried to guilt me. Kate, you're being too harsh. They have a new daughter-in-law. You should let them move on. I laughed. Is their way of moving on forcing me to pay for it? Then came Kevin's long text, accusing me of destroying his family's honor. Ending with the familiar line. Just tell me what you want. Stop making a scene. I read it and didn't reply. He still wasn't asking if I was hurt. He was only asking if his family's honor was intact. I looked out the window as the sky began to lighten. I knew then that they wouldn't stop, and I knew I would not retreat. To live in peace, I had to live by the truth, by the law, and by my own self-respect. The morning after the hotel fiasco, I didn't sleep in or wallow. I got up, ate a piece of toast, and went straight to Mr. Harrison's office. I understood that if I won this battle with emotion, they would call me a vengeful woman. If I won with the law, they would have nothing left to say. Mr. Harrison looked at me. Have you decided to cut all ties? I replied, yes, but I want to do it properly. He nodded. Then we do it with deadlines, evidence, and proof of delivery. We drafted a formal notice to vacate the property, which was legally in my name, Catherine Fan. The notice was cold, clear, and professional, citing the legal basis for the termination of their tenancy at will and giving them a reasonable deadline to move out. Mr. Harrison advised against phone calls to avoid arguments. Everything would be sent via certified mail, and we would have a process server document the delivery. I followed his instructions exactly. Around 11 a.m., a process server accompanied the mail carrier to the condo. I stood outside the door, holding my file, feeling strangely calm. Jessica opened the door, her eyes widening in anger. What are you doing here? I didn't step inside. I'm here to deliver a legal notice. Please accept it. She moved to snatch and tear it, but the process server spoke up. Whether you accept it or not will be noted in the official record. Hearing those words, Jessica froze. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of official documents. Sharon came out, wearing house clothes but still adorned with a gold bracelet, her eyes red from a sleepless night. She looked at me as if I were a thief. Are you trying to throw us out on the street? I replied, I'm not throwing anyone out today. I am giving you the legal notice period to vacate the property. She snarled. You have no decency. I paid for my decency for 3 years with my money, my labor, and my humiliation. Now, I will proceed with the law. With that, I signed the proof of delivery and left without another word. That afternoon, I met with a real estate agent. I was direct. The condo is in my name. The current occupants have been given notice to vacate. Please find a buyer who is willing to wait for possession. The agent understood. Being upfront like this is good. We might have to price it a little below market. I agreed. A small price to pay for a clean break. 2 days later, a for sale sign went up. Sharon called me repeatedly. First she screamed, then she cried, then she tried a softer tone. Kate, I'm an old woman. I know I have a temper. Please have some compassion. I didn't engage. I just texted back. Please direct all communication to my lawyer. My compassion had run out. Amidst the chaos, only Mark sent a different kind of message. You just do what the law says. I can't defend what's wrong anymore. A week later, a young couple came to see the condo. I showed them the deed, the legal notices, and explained the situation transparently. They appreciated my honesty and agreed to the terms. On the day we signed the purchase agreement, Sharon showed up at the real estate office, causing a scene. She accused me of being vengeful and heartless. I remained silent while my lawyer reiterated that the property was legally mine and any attempt to interfere with the sale would be documented. That quieted her. That evening, I sat alone in my studio, looking at the signed contract. I didn't feel victorious, just lighter, as if I had finally taken off a wet coat I had been wearing for 3 years. Some might call me cold, but compassion without boundaries is just an invitation to be exploited. I locked the documents away. And, for the first time in a very long time, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. I thought selling the condo would be the end of it. But the real battle was at the company I had funded with 60% of my own money. About 10 days after the hotel incident, Susan, my former accountant, sent an urgent message. I met her at a quiet cafe. She looked pale and exhausted. Kate, they forced me to resign. Who? I asked. She's in the office now, acting like she owns the place. He introduced her as the new financial manager. I clenched my fists under the table. Susan continued, her voice trembling. He wanted me to approve a series of suspicious payments. I refused. So he accused me of insubordination and told me to hand over my work. I asked what she gave him. I only gave him the current files. I kept copies of the important documents. I was afraid if I gave him everything, you would have no way to prove anything later. She pulled a thin folder from her bag. It was filled with damning evidence. Bank statements showing regular, unexplained transfers to Amber Scott's personal account. A receipt for a car purchased in Amber's name. Invoices for luxury goods and resort stays. All logged as client entertainment. My throat went dry. I asked Susan, "Are you sure this was company money?" She nodded. Yes, it came directly from the company account. Some transfers were made through the company's online banking portal. The dates on the hotel receipts for 2 people matched the days Kevin said he was on a business trip. The paper trail was undeniable. I put the folder in my bag. You did the right thing, Susan. Let me handle the rest. That afternoon, I was back in Mr. Harrison's office. He reviewed the new evidence. Kate, this is no longer a personal matter. This is clear evidence of embezzlement. As the majority shareholder, you have the right to demand a full audit and call a shareholder meeting. But first, we need to stop the bleeding. We sent 2 formal letters. The first went to Kevin, in his capacity as CEO, demanding a full explanation for the itemized list of suspicious expenditures. The second went to the bank, notifying them of an internal shareholder dispute and requesting a review of recent unusual transactions. That night, Kevin called, his voice laced with fury. Kate, are you trying to destroy the company? I replied. Is the company being destroyed by me? Or by you using its funds to support your mistress? He was silent for a moment, then changed his tactic. You're turning a family matter into a legal one. I said slowly. No. You turned company money into your personal piggy bank. I am just putting it back where it belongs. I hung up, remembering the day we hung the sign. Miller and Fan Supplies. A name that once filled me with pride. A few days later, my brother made a phone call to the CEO of our largest client. He didn't make threats. He simply, as one businessman to another, informed him of the ongoing shareholder dispute and the potential risk to their supply chain. In business, the word risk is a powerful motivator. That afternoon, the client put a temporary hold on all new orders. The dominoes began to fall. The bank scheduled a meeting to review our accounts. A major supplier switched us to a cash-on-delivery payment model. I saw some of our former employees at lunch. They spoke of Kevin's increasingly erratic behavior and the incompetence of the new financial manager. The final call came from Kevin himself, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. He sounded desperate. "Kate, can we talk?" I replied, "Speak to my lawyer." He showed up at my apartment building that evening, looking haggard. "Please, Kate, make it stop." I looked at him. I could see the fear in his eyes. The fear of losing his title, his reputation, his entire facade. Then came Amber's attempt at blackmail. A blurry photo of me with the real estate agent appeared online, with a caption suggesting I had been having an affair all along. Then came the text messages.